The M1 MacBook Air. At this point in time, this laptop is already a year and 3 months old. And at the end of last year, when Windows 11 was announced, I got so frustrated with Windows to the point that I wanted a way out. And then John brought up an idea. Why not just get the M1 MacBook? And so we did. We bought one. And I've spent the past month or so with the MacBook Air. And throughout my time with it, I have a lot of interesting experiences to share, and in this video I will share you my experience and also tell you why I can and cannot recommend the M1 MacBook Air. Okay, I think I need to provide a little bit of backstory first. This is not my first time using a Mac. I've used a Hackintosh back when OS X 10.6 was released, and I also used a MacBook Air 2011 until a few years ago. So I'm not walking into the MacBook experience totally blind. And since the M1 MacBook Air is already more than a year old, I'll skip the introduction and jump straight into why I like the M1 MacBook Air and why I can recommend it if you're looking for a laptop. We won't go into the performance and specs because you already know all of that. So yeah, the M1 MacBook Air is just superb in terms of performance per watt. The first thing that I like about the M1 MacBook Air is of course the design. So this design is very similar to the previous generation of MacBook Airs, particularly in terms of its wedge-shaped design when viewed from the side. And like the previous generation of MacBook Airs, this laptop is still super lightweight too. Fun fact, MacBook Air is the trendsetter of ultrabooks, also known as thin and light laptops today. Just don't mind the sparkly aesthetic that we have on this particular unit of the M1 MacBook Air, because I bought a skin thinking that it's just a basic matte texture, but turned out it's sparkly and also kind of rough. And my second reason that I can recommend the M1 MacBook Air is that the M1 chip itself. You see, Apple had the dream to make an entirely fanless laptop for some time. It started with the MacBook 2015 with the Intel Core M processor, and that was disastrous, and it was a lose-lose situation since it constantly thermothrottled and the performance tanked real hard. And fast forward to November of 2020, Apple announced their own Apple Silicon, also known as the M1. Since then, they're using this in-house chip, and Apple can literally design how this chip should work with their own product. They can decide how much power draw it should take, and hence making the M1 MacBook Air completely fanless. And yet, it doesn't thermothrottle unless I run Premiere Pro and start to add a lot of fancy effects, just like how I edit videos on my few-year-old high-end desktop Windows PC. And seriously, when I unboxed the M1 MacBook Air, the power supply was only 30 watts. Here's the power supply. I didn't even take it out of the box, by the way, because I didn't need to. More on that later. So here it is, this tiny little power brick. And the amount of performance coming out of this laptop by only consuming 30 watts in terms of power, when compared with my desktop that's consuming like about 500 watts of power, is just amazing. And the M1 chip doesn't need to necessarily outperform a Windows desktop. It just needs to match the level of performance while being multiple magnitudes more efficient. And back to the charger for a while. The M1 MacBook Air chargers are using USB PD standards, so the reason why I left this charger in the box is because I was using the Ugreen 100-watt GAN charger to charge this laptop instead, and I don't want any more clutter on my desk, so that works. And the third reason I like the MacBook Air is of course that magnificent screen. This isn't even Apple's best display up to date, because this is just a 13.3-inch IPS LCD screen with 2560 by 1600 pixels in resolution. I truly appreciate that 16 by 10 aspect ratio because I can just see more on these kind of smaller laptops, and that little extra space makes a huge difference in terms of productivity work. And the fourth reason why I like this is because of the trackpad. Have you ever wondered why Apple is the gold standard when it comes to trackpads? Well, there are a multiple of different reasons. Firstly, that glass surface on the trackpad is just very smooth. The tracking is also fantastic, and then there is the haptic engine, which makes the clicks feel so much more consistent and satisfying compared to literally any other Windows laptops that I've used. Apple also tightly integrates the hardware with macOS. The trackpad with its amazing tracking capabilities boils down to how macOS actually works. Multi-touch gestures and shortcuts are just unrivaled by any other Windows laptops until years later since its first debut of this trackpad. So I've been singing praises about the M1 MacBook Air and why I can't recommend this laptop to everyone, and what's the reason behind that? Well, I only have one reason actually, and that is macOS. If you've used macOS before and you're okay with it, then yeah, the M1 MacBook Air is just going to be perfect for you. However, if this is going to be your first time using macOS, then you're gonna have a roller coaster experience. The basic idea of files, folders, and apps are still the same as Windows, but how everything works is completely different. For example, the equivalent of Windows Explorer in macOS is Finder, but they don't work particularly the same. There's no start menu in macOS. Installing and uninstalling apps on macOS is light years easier, faster, and also cleaner than Windows will ever be. But changing some of the simple settings on macOS requires you to boot up the terminal. And one big potential problem when it comes to external drives is that if you're already using Windows and you want to migrate to macOS, then your drives, your external SSDs or external hard drives will most probably not work if you didn't format it to exFAT. Because Windows will default to NTFS and NTFS is now compatible with Apple stuff. So you will most probably have to wipe your external drives clean just to gain access with an Apple device. Otherwise, you have to pay for these kind of special applications just to gain access to NTFS file partition tables on the Mac. This is not a problem for me since I made it a habit of mine to use exFAT file format since exFAT is literally compatible with every other major operating systems out there: Windows, macOS, Linux, and even Chrome OS. And I can go on and on about the differences between macOS and Windows, but we'll save that for another video. In summary, migrating from Windows to macOS will require you to relearn everything, even the basics on how to shut down the computer, how to install applications, how to use keyboard shortcuts, and because Macs have Command, Option, and Control keys, copy and pasting and even cutting files is completely different on macOS. But if you're up to the challenge, which I can assure you that you'll become a much better tech person after that, you'll be rewarded with a computing experience unlike any other. But before we end this video, there is yet another reason why I can recommend the M1 MacBook Air, and that is actually the price. Yes, I'm praising an Apple product for its price, and that is because the M1 MacBook Air starts from only 4,399 ringgit. Seriously, it's pretty difficult to find a thin and light laptop that has similar build quality with this level of performance and battery life at this price range from a competitor in terms of Windows PCs. I'm sure a lot of people will ask, hey, that price only comes with 8 gigs of RAM, how is that sufficient? And to that I say you don't really have to worry much because macOS does a fantastic job in terms of managing RAM usage. Though with that said, we still ordered this particular M1 MacBook Air with 16 gigs of RAM instead because we are going to edit some simpler videos using this laptop as a backup machine. So yeah, those are the reasons why I can and cannot recommend the M1 MacBook Air. And if this video is gonna help you, then just comment down below on how this video is gonna help you, and then do subscribe for more because we do have a lot more content revolving around macOS, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Oh, by the way, the MacBook Air manages to impress us so much that we also ordered a MacBook Pro 14 with the M1 Pro chip. Review of that laptop is coming soon.